was a lovely dog, but he was a project. I think that's what it was. It took time for me to get him on board, but eventually did. He cracked, and he was a lovely dog.
Well, this deep searching interview is going to start with this question, Bill.
Go on.
You do say this is a memoir of sorts.
Yes.
So is it because you didn't want to write another sort of memoir?
That's right. Well, I didn't want to write the traditional memoir, which is the one where it's a kind of a slow jog through your life in a linear fashion. I just wanted to have some other more interesting way to go off at tangents and mention, periods of my life that actually coincided with a pet or with an animal encounter. So it was very much like a conscious decision to give it a theme rather than just a straightforward memoir.
So we do learn a bit about your life. The fact that you used to go on caravan holidays, notably to the beautiful Cumbrian coastline near Workington.
Yes, that's right.
Not far from Sellafield.
No, it's under the shadow of Sellafield. And it was, I've never quite divulged really the reasons why my parents wanted to go camping next to Sellafield. But the thing is, my theory is that caravanning is something we did as a feature of my childhood, but pulling a caravan over steep hills is quite tricky. So my dad, being a sort of person that he is, he would have looked at that and thought, no, that's just a risk I'm not prepared to take with the caravan. We'll get stuck in a pass with the caravan. So what we'll do, we'll circumvent the lakes, we'll go up the coast, and there's a lovely little town there, lovely little coastal town, Workington, and they've got a caravan club campsite nearby. We'll camp there. And the fact that it is very close to the Magnox spent fuel reprocessing plant is neither here nor there.
Did it impact on the local wildlife, didn't it? Because there's a really funny story, well, actually a slightly troubling story about the creatures you saw.
Yes, that's right. Well, I mean, as my girlfriend at the time, who was then later to become my wife, we walked along the beach at Workington, which is a very pretty town, by the way. I don't really want to sort of, run it down. It's a very pretty little place. And we walked along the beach at night, and we saw these creatures scuttling along on the sand and on the rocks, and they looked luminous. I mean, they definitely were glowing in the moonlight in that kind of bioluminescence which you sometimes see in algae. And I thought perhaps they were, perhaps they were radiation mutated. That's my initial thought. I thought these were radiation-affected slaters is the word that's used, but they were kind of, aquatic woodlice, and they were quite big, and they were quite bluish, and they seemed larger and blue, more blue than any woodlice I've ever seen before or since.
And you've never seen anything like that. You've been all over the world.
I've been all over the world.
Right.
I've never seen anything like that, and certainly not in these isles.
Okay.
I mean, it seemed quite strange. As I say, in the book, I should have actually described them to the Natural History Museum as something new to science. But in the end, we just decided to give them a wide berth.
You have this incredible menagerie in your home, but I mean, presumably you also grew up with pets, did you? Yeah. How many as a kid did you have?
We had a dog. We had a family dog, Tinker, the West Highland White Terrier, and other relatives had dogs as well. So there was always animals around. So it seemed entirely natural to have animals. My wife had a dog when she first came down to live with me. She brought a dog, and then we sort of took on animals gradually as over the years. It sort of snowballed. We'd go to the pet shop to get some dog food and some various bits and pieces and bones and whatever, and then they'd say, "Oh, we've got this rabbit that nobody wants. We're thinking about euthanasia," and we were like, "No, don't do that. We'll take it." So that was the start of it.
Okay.
And then
Can we run through the current crop living Shea Bailey?
Shea Bailey, we've got 4 parrots, the cockatoos, and we've got 3 dogs. We've got a quantity of carp. We've got some lizards, some tree frogs, a couple of partridges, a few other birds. I can't remember quite what they are, exotic birds, and we've got also some armadillos. So that's relatively restrained for us.
Is it? Yes. I mean, you're not open to the public, are you? We should make clear this is your
No,
private
no.
family home.
That's right. Yeah. In fact, well, we've often said over the years what we should do is get a turnstile put in and a gift shop, and then it would sort of make sense. But no, these are animals which we've taken on, looked after because for whatever reason they were extraneous to requirements at a wildlife park or a zoo that couldn't look after them. Or they were, temporarily in transit somewhere, and we've said, oh, we'll provide a home for them until a home can be found. And of course, sometimes with fostering like that, they end up staying for years.
Yeah. The rescue dogs you have, I mean, have you exclusively owned rescue dogs?
Yeah, we've had rescues for many years. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's not an easy business, is it?
No, well, it isn't because they've all got a bit of baggage, and you don't quite know what that is, and sometimes it takes a while before that reveals itself, and you might even be just moving your hand in a certain way, or a sound or a loud bang will just they've obviously had some trauma in the past, but they make fantastic pets once they realise that this is it. They're not going to get shifted, moved on. They are immensely loyal and wonderfully sort of quirky, full of character, and I think they make incredible pets, family pets.
But it's not a decision. I don't think anyone should take it lightly, should they? If they're going to do this, you've got to properly invest in this.
Yeah, oh, well, that's right. You have to. I mean, exactly. You have to really think hard about how you're going to be able to look after this animal. Are you going to be able to provide, the exercise that it needs, the companionship that it needs? You're going to be able to, what happens if you're going away? You're going to be able to get someone to look after it. Can you fit it into your life in a way that it's not going to, make them feel either they're not being looked after, not fed, groomed, exercised? So it's a big commitment. True, absolutely right. But, it pays dividends.
Over the years then, would you be able to point to a favourite dog?
I mean, we've had some amazing dogs over the years. I mean, we had this wonderful dog, Rocky. He was a Patterdale Terrier. He was a magic dog. He lived to a ripe old age of 20. And recently we had a rescued tiger who was a real mix of different things. We didn't quite know what he was. He was an odd-looking dog. He was a spindly bag of bones. He had a kind of sagging back and a kind of tail that hung down. He always looked permanently disappointed by something. He had a kind of mournful demeanour and just a kind of a resigned, attitude. And he was just, he, like other dogs, would come and bound up and see you when you come in, and hey, you're back, and then Tiger would just look at you like, yeah, yeah, so you're back. What do you want me to do about it? Wag my tail? No, I can't be bothered. And so he had this wonderful, almost like a sort of a haughty demeanour, which was a very sweet natured dog. He was a lovely dog, but he was a project. I think that's what it was. It took time for me to get him on board, but eventually did. He cracked, and he was a lovely dog.
Was that the dog who would come to you and you would be able to tickle his tummy and rub his belly?
Yeah, you could do. Yes,
yeah.
He would accept it up to a point, and then just all right, that's enough of that. And he was quite aloof in many ways, and he caused us all manner of problems because he was a bolter. He'd lived on the streets, and so he had a kind of still a street sort of savvy mentality. And so occasionally, if he saw the door open, his eyes sort of like would narrow and think, there's a way out here. And then on a couple of occasions, he did get out, and he went for miles and miles and miles, just loping along the streets. Lord knows how he wasn't injured. And because he was chipped, someone would stop him. And fortunately, they were a dog person who knew where to look for these things. And they found we had a little disc with his number, and they phoned us up. And we went to pick him up, and he just looked like suitably embarrassed, like, yeah, I'm really sorry about that. I mean, messed up there. And he had his fan club, that we'd take him to the park and people would bring him treats. He was well loved, and, he had a great life.
I want you to tell us about the dog. I think was it Ruby, who had, it was a bit of a one-sided love affair with a quite long-suffering tortoise. Also a lady, I should say. Yes,
that's right, yes. Well, we thought it was a gentleman tortoise for a while, and we called it Godfrey. after the Dad's Army character.
Private Godfrey.
Private Godfrey, played beautifully by Arnold Ridley. And then we had it sexed, which is obviously something you do with you when you have animals. And we discovered it wasn't actually a man at all. It was a female tortoise, so we called it Dolly after... There's a scene where Arnold, he says, "My sister Dolly has made some upside down cake," and so we got renamed the tortoise Dolly, and the dog Ruby, who is a female dog, she just took a liking. Well, I say liking, she kind of became quite possessive over this tortoise and would stand over it to the point the other dogs were not allowed near it. It was like she claimed her as her own, which was quite sweet. But then it sort of. It escalated a little bit into the point that she, trying to sort of put this delicately, she had a more kind of carnal interest in the tortoise, to the point that she would actually, she would sort of hump its shell, and this obviously was. It was quite alarming for guests where they look out and see this happening. Like, what are you doing with these animals? What are you teaching them? And anyway, the tortoise was completely oblivious. Initially she would just retreat into a shell, and then after a while just went, just God, get on with it, have your fun, and she'd carry on eating her lunch. So she'd carry on munching away. Yeah, well, this will be over in a minute, and of course it meant that her shell was always buffed to a lovely sheen.
Yeah, you see, there's always a plus side.
There's always a plus. Interspecies love.
Yes. I can probably make the case for almost every creature on Earth, like you. I know you're a proper lover of all things natural world.
Yeah.
But the bat, I mean, you write about bats, and I've only seen a few in my Girl Guide camping days.
Oh.
They're terrifying. And en masse, they are really terrifying.
Well, absolutely. And of course, bats are sort of feature as a kind of this mythical figure of dread, don't they, in so much film and literature. And actually a lot of people, I mean, it's always women particularly were always featured in films, weren't they, in early films and 50s and 60s films, like beating away, and then the bat's going to get caught in my hair, the bat, but actually in Britain we only have tiny little bats. We have little pipistrelles, which are kind of very, very sweet. But the bats that I encountered and I write about in the book were the flying foxes, these beautiful, enormous sized bats that inhabited this cave in the Philippines, and they are quite intimidating when they all fly out en masse. And when you actually go into a bat cave, there's a racket of noise and screeching, and there's mating going on, and there's all kinds of stuff. It's chaos. And then they all fly out in this huge black cloud. But it's undeniably impressive. I mean, it's absolutely staggering to watch. And, I sort of love them. I love them because they are so sort of, maybe demeaned, and they're sort of feared.
Well, because they're bloody ugly.
Well, I don't know. Little flying fox has got a lovely, sweet little foxy face.
No, it hasn't. There is a touching bit in the book where you're in South Africa and you're filming some baboons.
Yes.
Who are clever creatures, and they've cottoned on to the happy campers coming by with their packed lunches.
Yeah.
And you just describe. You write about just a very brief encounter with eye-to-eye contact with a baboon.
Yes, it was a wonderful moment. The male baboons, the Cape Chacma baboons, they're quite big, aggressive creatures. They're quite intimidating, and they just leave all the humans alone in case they want to do, or else they just nick something off them, or they steal their lunch or whatever. But the adolescents are quite sweet, and they're curious. And when I was filming, I just sat down for a moment, and then a little troop of these adolescent baboons were kind of gradually getting closer and closer, almost like daring each other to get closer. And then the boldest of the lot came forwards, and he sort of very gently placed his paw on my arm and looked at me in this lovely sort of soft gaze. And it was just a gorgeous moment. It was almost like a little moment. Is that he looked at me like, is this it's okay if I put my paw on your arm? And we sort of shared a bit of a moment. There was a kind of a, interspecies sort of connection, and then he just leapt back and started shrieking, and all the other baboons are like, he touched it, he touched the thing, he touched the thing, he touched it, and they all ran off shrieking. But it was just, it was lovely. It was it meant to, it was something, because the fact I can remember it now. It made a deep impression on me.
Would you trust anyone who didn't have a pet? I'm always interested in people who, for whatever reason, and it may be practical that they just can't have a pet, but
do you know what? I've known people, very close friends of mine who've not had pets, and yet I said to them, well, you say that. They're like, well, I'm not a dog person, avowedly not a dog person or a pet person, and I would say, look, you say that now, but they'll one day, and I've got to say, in every one of those occasions, I would go around to someone's house who would be basically telling me that, if you need to get rid of these animals, but what you're doing with all these animals, I can help you get rid of them, and then I'd go around their house and I'd open the door and this little fluffy ball of a dog would greet me, and then this person, this hitherto avowed non-dog lover would scoop them up. Oh, hello, Fluffy. And I just see, eventually you crack.
Yeah. I have only seen you live once, and it was at the Hay Festival. I know it was a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay. And the Hay Festival. Oh, yes.
Yeah, you did do it, Bill, didn't you?
I've done the Hay Festival many times.
Yeah, and I didn't really know what to expect, and it was incredibly funny. I mean, you don't need to hear this, but you are brilliant on stage. But what you don't do, you never swear, do you? I don't think you definitely didn't swear that night. There's no smut in your act at all, but nor is it's not straightforwardly observational comedy either. What is it?
Well, it's whatever those I suppose things are not. I suppose. I mean, it's what I've carved out my own style over the years, and it's really a collection of stories and jokes and musical kind of observations, really, woven into my own style of humour, I suppose. And I mean, the swearing thing is not. It was never really a conscious thing. I remember one evening at the Comedy Store, and I thought, just as an exercise, I wonder if I can get through, because it was very sweary. I mean, blokey stand-up used to be. I mean, I suppose it is still, but there was a lot of swearing. I thought, it's almost like, is there a way of doing this where you don't have to do this? Because the English language is so rich and full of nuance and meaning. Surely there's a way to try and subvert it a little bit. Anyway, so I did it as an exercise, and instead of a swear word or whatever, I used some ancient word, some old English word, rascal, rapscallion, and it got equally a laugh. And I just thought, well, it's not like I'm going to be losing a laugh if, you know what I mean? I think even at that stage, I'd have thought I wouldn't have sacrificed a laugh if it meant, well, okay, there's a swear word coming now, and it comes, boom, and there's a shock value to it. But I just thought, I realised then, there's a way to do it where you're not compromising on the comedy, and people still love it. It's just, for some reason, it's like there's so much of it around. You just think, if you're on stage and you have the ability to craft something, why not? Why not use it? So that's the reason for that. And also, I suppose, I've had a long time to think about this comedy. It's just evolved over many years. My first gig was when I was 18, and that was a mixture of absurd observation, but stories and strange connections and music. And I guess it's just continued ever since.
What gave you the confidence as an 18-year-old to stand up there and do it?
I don't know. I think there's something about that my own kind of, I suppose I wouldn't consider myself, but people do describe me as some sort of eccentric, and that I've always, I've loved performing ever since I was a kid. In fact, by 18, I started probably when I was 4 or 5. It just felt like a natural thing to do. It was I'd learned little bits of material on the piano that I'd copied from Les Dawson or something, and I would play him at a family funeral. Actually, it was a funeral was the first time I did that. Probably the wrong occasion for that, but it seemed to get a laugh. It got a reaction, Somebody spat some tea out, and then somebody dropped something, and then somebody swore, and I thought, wow, God, the power of that. That's amazing. So, and I guess that's it. It's just something that we all have a reason to be here. My dear friend Sean Locke, a fellow comedian who died in 2021, he once said to me I'd done a show, and he said, Bill, this is what you were born to do. And I guess that's true. I guess that's it. I mean, I'm very good at any other thing, but this is one thing I can do, and that's it.
Yeah, but if your epitaph was kind to animals, made people laugh, it's not that bad, is it?
I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah. Just checking on the time. I can't remember what time you're supposed to finish, Bill. I've got a couple more in my locker if you don't mind pressing on for 2 more minutes.
Okay, let's press on. Come on.
You don't, I mean, would you describe yourself as a political comedian? You have, no, but you have said you support the Labour Party.
Yeah.
And I think there were lots of people who were, I mean, we are British, so we never get too kind of overjoyed. But I was mildly optimistic about the return of love. That's as good as it gets.
That's about as enthusiastic as we all were.
All right. Well, how's it going, Bill?
Well, it's been what somebody described it as a little bit of a bumpy start, and I think that's true. It's a little bit. It's not quite, I think, how they imagined it, and it's for all of us who supported them. It's a little bit like, really? Well, what's is there any way that policy and vision, can we have some of that rather than being mired down in endless kind of headlines, which of course there will be, and about freebies and about this and about pensioners, all of that. I mean, it seems like these are avoidable traps. These are things that you could head off at the pass with a bit of forethought, and I'm sure knowing yourself, if you're in the public eye, you have to predict these things. You have to think about how something will look, or the optics, I suppose, is the word of the moment. And so it is a bit like that. It seems it's a bit chaotic and a bit ill-conceived at the moment.
Okay, but early days.
Yes.
And as we look across the Atlantic to the possibilities there, you'd rather be here, wouldn't you?
Well, it is quite extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, as a naturally, sort of obviously politically, I'm not really a Trump fan, but I am still fascinated by how someone who like that gets such an enormous amount of following. That's the thing, I think, which I think probably sort of it's around the world, people are fascinated by that, and almost they can't quite believe it. Like millions of people, not just 70 million, 75 million, something voted for him at the last election. And I think the thing is, you have to try and understand it. That's the only way you can. I mean, the way I look at it is like, well, okay, is this some sort of mass hysteria? No, it's people had genuine grievances, and he seemed to have the solutions. That's the only way you can really describe it, and his popularity. And so what he represents, I kind of tried to delineate the two. He represents a kind of the anti-politics, the guy in the bar sticking it to the man, telling it like it is. Yeah, and that's enormously attractive to a lot of people. The idea of having someone like that who's not from the political kind of world, who is an outsider, a bit of a rogue, an outlier. All of those people are always immensely attractive to people. Like we have them here, but personally, I find it's staggering that someone in public life who's so seemingly quite damaged, quite sort of, he takes offence so lightly. He takes, he takes grievance and narcissism and all of those things that you see in someone. You think, how can someone be near power? This is someone who shouldn't ever be near power because they're out of control.
Yeah. So the night, well, it's relatively close, isn't it? It'll be in a couple of weeks' time now.
Yeah.
Will you be paying close attention that night?
I will.
Yeah.
I am fascinated by it. It's very close, isn't it? I mean, it's incredibly close. It's down to a few swing states, and they're you don't know quite how they will vote on the night. You know, the election could hang on really a handful of the the electoral college votes, and I can't imagine it. I can't think of an election that's probably is going to be as close as this.
Right. If Donald Trump were an animal, what kind of animal would he be?
something. I mean, he seems like he's a big beast, but he's actually quite fragile. So I imagine, he's like one of those giant sort of what do they call them? Like a giant moth that looks scary. But is actually just drawn to the light. Actually, it's quite a good...
I think you've got it, Bill.
I think it's quite a good analogy. He's drawn to the light constantly.
I think we'll end it there. We've peaked. Thank you very much.